I stood in the back of the barn, the old beams creaking softly above us as the lights flickered with every warm breeze that rolled through the valley. My sister Carla stood center stage with a champagne flute in one hand and the other raised dramatically. She had always loved a spotlight, always knew how to build a moment. It was her 35th birthday, and somehow, despite the occasion supposedly being casual, a backyard barbecue, she said she'd managed to rent a tent-string Fairy Lights order a custom cake with her face airbrushed on it, and print programs. Yes, actual folded programs. A celebration of Carla past, present, and purpose. I almost didn't come. I had spent the morning replacing a fence post that one of the goats had knocked loose. I smelled like sweat and cedar shavings, and I knew if I came, I'd be sitting through a night of stories that started with, "Remember when I," and ended with some kind of product tie-in. But I came anyway. Maybe curiosity, maybe guilt, maybe both. Carla cleared her throat, smiling to the crowd. "I just want to thank everyone who's ever believed in me," she said, "especially during the last year. It's been transformative. And tonight, I want to share something really special." She paused. Everyone leaned in. My father's legacy, his land, his farm, his dream, is now mine to continue. "That's right," she said, eyes wet. "He left the farm to me, in writing, in spirit, and I will be honoring that by turning it into a wellness sanctuary for women who need space to heal." People gasped. A few clapped. Someone shouted, "Amazing!" I didn't move, I didn't blink. I just stared at the back of her head, her curls bouncing as she hugged Mom. My jaw didn't clench. My shoulders didn't stiffen. I stayed still, sipping lemonade from a plastic cup and watching a version of my life be rewritten in real time. She held up a frame. Inside, what looked like a copy of some kind of document. It was blurry from the distance, but I recognized the margins. She had printed something resembling a will. "I know he'd be proud," she said. I nodded to myself. Not in agreement, just acknowledgement. She had made her announcement. But I had the will. My father didn't talk much about legacy. He wasn't the kind of man who made big speeches or left cryptic letters for us to find after he passed. He believed in fences that held crops that didn't fail, and livestock that stayed fed. His idea of love was making sure you had enough gas in your truck before the sun went down. He started slowing down in his early 70s. Nothing sudden, just less noise in the mornings, fewer walks to the far field. I noticed the barn wasn't as organized. The tractor sat longer between uses, and he kept forgetting to refill the water troughs. So I came home. At the time, I was working for the forestry department 2 towns over. Not glamorous, but steady. I left a leased apartment, boxed my books, and returned to the house I hadn't called home in almost 2 decades. I told myself it was temporary. A few months, long enough to help him stabilize. That turned into 3 years. I didn't regret it. There's something steadying about land. About the way sunrise cuts across a field, the way animals fall into rhythm with your footsteps, the way seasons mark time in honest ways. I mended the fence rows. I organized the barn. I taught myself how to tune up the tractor. I started writing grocery lists again. Dad didn't ask for help out loud, but he accepted it in silence. That was our agreement. He'd sit on the porch and I'd bring him coffee. I paid the bills he stopped opening. He'd nod as I handed him dinner and say, "Smells fine." That was as close to thank you as I ever got. When the hospital stays began, I drove him to every one. I memorized his medication schedule. I kept track of which nurse actually listened. By the second admission, I started sleeping on the couch. When he stopped getting out of bed entirely, I moved the recliner to the window so he could still watch the east pasture. Carla didn't come until the final month. She arrived in a rental SUV wearing sunglasses inside the house and said she'd cleared a week, 1 week. She cried a lot, took videos of Dad holding her hand, whispered things to him like, "I'm here now, Daddy. We're going to fix everything." He mostly stared out the window. The day he passed, she wasn't there. She had driven back to the city for a podcast interview. I held his hand. It was quiet. He didn't say anything grand, just looked at me once and said, "You keep things alive." And then he stopped breathing. After the funeral, the lawyer met me at the house. He was a tired-looking man named Willis who had done Dad's taxes for years. He handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a simple will, signed and dated with a witness and notary stamp. It said the farm belonged to me. No conditions, no shared names, no poetic wording. Just this. To my daughter, Margaret Rivers, who showed up. The land is hers. Do not dispute. I didn't tell anyone. There was no announcement, no argument. I went back to feeding chickens. I paid the property tax. I started tracking rainfall again. When Carla called a few weeks later asking about a potential women's retreat concept, I said she could come visit, but I never said yes. I never said no either. That was my mistake. Carla came back to the farm 6 weeks after the funeral. She didn't ask if it was a good time, just called from halfway down the highway and said she needed a break from the noise. City life is choking me, she said, like she hadn't spent the past 10 years building a brand on exactly that noise. She arrived with a suitcase the size of a freezer, her laptop bag, and a ring light. I watched from the porch as she unpacked designer sneakers and essential oils next to the chicken feed. I need this, she said, breathing deep like the air was part of some curated cleanse. This place grounds me. I didn't argue. I made up the spare bedroom, the one that used to be hers, before she moved to New York, and left a clean towel on the bed. I told her I usually went to sleep by 10 and was up by 5. She nodded, but I knew those hours weren't meant for her. By the end of the first week, she had rearranged the living room for better flow. By the second, she had ordered throw pillows and sage bundles online. She walked around barefoot, sipping green drinks and humming songs I didn't recognize. Then came the filming. She started posting videos with captions like, "My return to my roots and finding healing in the land that raised me." There were slow-motion clips of her brushing her fingers across wheat twirling in the driveway, sitting in front of the barn with her journal open, but blank. At first I laughed, then I stopped laughing. She began taking meetings in the sunroom, virtual coaching calls with women who paid her to guide them through emotional breakthroughs. She spoke in long, slow sentences, used words like energetic boundaries and soul recalibration. Outside, I was refilling troughs and spraying the pig pen. One night she said, "I've been thinking, this place could be so much more than a farm." I didn't look up from my plate. "I mean, it already has such good bones," she continued. "Imagine cabins, walking paths, group retreats, women gathering under the stars, crying together, healing old wounds." I chewed, swallowed. Sounds expensive. "Not if it's a family venture," she said. "We could apply for grants, build something in Dad's honor." I said nothing. That was her cue to keep going. She told me she'd already started sketching out ideas, floor plans, logos, even a name, River Sanctuary. She thought it sounded peaceful. She asked if I could handle the maintenance if she did the branding. She said she could lead yoga on the porch. People would pay thousands. Again, I said nothing. That night I sat on the back steps and looked out at the pasture, dark and wide. I thought about Dad in that same spot, drinking weak coffee and checking the weather with his phone upside down. I thought about how hard his hands were even in the end. Carla had ideas, but I had memory, and the land does not belong to whoever dreams the loudest. The first time I noticed the sign, it was hanging just past the front gate, nailed crookedly to the fence post with pink twine. River Sanctuary, a space for women to heal. Hand-painted in soft teal letters with a sunburst logo Carla must have printed from her Pinterest board. I didn't say anything. I just stood there holding a sack of chicken feed, staring at the sign like it had grown there overnight. Inside the house, the changes were harder to miss. Our old coffee mugs had been replaced by white ceramic ones that said intention and stillness. Carla had brought essential oil diffusers into every room, and the scent of lavender clashed with the smell of hay and wet boots. The bookshelf in the hallway was now filled with her self-published journals and manifesting guides. I found one of them open on the kitchen table one morning, a section titled Turning Inheritance into Impact. I knew what she was doing. Slowly, one plant, one hashtag, one mood board at a time, she was building a narrative. And the longer I stayed quiet, the more real it became. People started visiting. A group of women from her online circle drove in from a nearby town to spend the weekend in ceremony. I wasn't invited to join, but I did see them gathered in the barn, sitting in a circle of old quilts chanting. One of them knocked on my door to ask if we had almond milk. The worst part wasn't the noise or the fake spirituality or the flower crowns. It was watching her take something that was never hers and make everyone else believe it always had been. Carla never mentioned the will, never asked who paid the land tax last quarter, never questioned why the electricity bill came in my name or why I was the one fixing broken fence lines at 6 in the morning. She didn't need to. She was building a brand, not a farm. She was using language, stories, and filters to shape the truth, and people were eating it up. Mom called me one afternoon, voice full of pride. Carla says the farm is becoming something special. Isn't that exciting? I asked her if she remembered what Dad said about the land before he passed. She hesitated. Well, sure. He loved both of you. That wasn't the point. The next day, I found my father's old work gloves tossed in the trash bin behind the house, replaced by a basket of white Guess slippers Carla had ordered in bulk. That night, I sat in the barn lights off the air, cool and dry. I took out the will. I hadn't looked at it in months. It was still sealed in the manila envelope from Mr. Willis, our lawyer. The handwriting on the front said simply, "To be opened if necessary." It wasn't necessary yet, but I felt it coming. The barn hadn't looked that clean in years. White folding chairs lined up in neat rows. Fresh flowers on every surface. String lights zigzagging across the rafters. Carla had even hung sheer curtains from the entrance, which fluttered with every breeze like they belonged at a beach wedding, not a cattle barn. She called it an intentional gathering. Her birthday celebration, yes, but more than that. A ceremony of renewal, she said. A chance to thank the people who poured into her healing. The invitations had gone out a month before. Digital, of course, with elegant gold script over filtered photos of the property. She'd used an old picture of Dad feeding chickens. Cropped me out. I considered not attending. I had a dozen reasons. The trough still needed to be scrubbed. One of the goats had an infected hoof. The roof over the tool shed needed patching. But none of those were the real reason. The truth was, I didn't want to see her claim something that wasn't hers. Not again. Not in front of a crowd. But I went anyway. I wore jeans and a flannel shirt, same as I always did. Everyone else looked like they had been styled for a photo shoot. Linen dresses, big hats, perfect skin. Carla floated around in a pale peach jumpsuit, hugging everyone twice, and handing out name tags that said things like grounded and aligned. Then came the speech. She stood near the front under a homemade wooden arch wrapped in vines she hadn't planted. The barn doors were open wide behind her, letting the late afternoon light spill across the room. She raised a glass of kombucha and smiled. I want to thank everyone for being part of this journey, she said. And tonight, I have something very close to my heart to share. She paused. Perfect timing. Everyone leaned in. This farm, this land, this sacred space has been in our family for generations. And before he passed, my father made it clear that he wanted me to carry it forward. A soft murmur rippled through the room. Mom dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Carla reached behind her and pulled forward a gold frame. Inside a piece of paper, a printed image of what looked like a will, faint signatures, no seal. This is a copy of what he gave me, she said. It's a symbolic passing of legacy, and I accept it with humility, gratitude, and purpose. Applause. A standing ovation from two of her friends. Someone whispered, "She's incredible." I stayed seated. I didn't clap. I didn't blink. She looked right at me, eyes wide expectant, like she was waiting for a nod, a smile, something. I sipped my water. She smiled back anyway and turned to the crowd. And I promised to honor this land, to turn it into a haven for women, for peace, for growth. They all raised their glasses. I folded my hands in my lap. She made her declaration. I had the will. I didn't say anything that night. No confrontation, no fact check, no declaration of my own. I left early while people were still hugging each other and taking pictures under the archway. Carla was surrounded by a circle of women swaying to acoustic music, their arms linked like they were closing a ritual. I slipped out the back past the goats across the gravel drive and into the house. I poured myself a glass of water, sat at the kitchen table, and opened the bottom drawer of the old hutch where I'd kept the envelope. The will was still there untouched, the paper slightly curled at the edges. I removed it gently, unfolded it, and stared at the signature Walter Rivers. Dated, witnessed, notarized, no poetry, no ceremony, just a sentence that meant everything. To my daughter Margaret Rivers, the farm belongs to her, entirely. There was no mention of Carla, not even once. At dawn, I changed the locks, the ones on the house, the barn, the shed, every structure. I replaced the Wi-Fi password, shut down the website she'd built through my home network, and logged out of the shared Spotify account she had used to play her retreat music through the barn speakers. By noon, the wooden sign that read Rivers Sanctuary was off the gate. I didn't break it. I didn't burn it. I just unscrewed the nails, leaned it against the porch, and walked away. Then I wrote an email, simple, direct. Subject: property access, body heat. Hi, Carla. Given recent events and some confusion regarding the ownership of the farm, I'll need to ask you to vacate by the end of the week. I've reattached a copy of Dad's will for clarity. Please let me know a time that works for you to pick up your things. Maggie. No emojis, no passive-aggressive phrases. Just clarity. She didn't respond for almost a full day. Then came a one-line text. Are you seriously doing this? I didn't reply. I spent the next morning collecting her things carefully. The ceramic bowl she'd brought for her tea blends the canvas with her vision board tacked on the stack of branded mugs with Rivers Retreat in cursive gold. I packed them neatly room by room, 10 boxes in all. Each box was labeled. Box 1, teacups for emotional unpacking. Box 3, wellness plans, unexecuted. Box 6, guest slippers unused. Box 10, entitlement, handle with care. I left them in the front hall next to the door she hadn't opened herself in weeks. She came by on Thursday afternoon, didn't knock, just stood in the yard, arms crossed. Her makeup was flawless, her expression was not. This is ridiculous, she said. You're making it ugly. No, I said, I'm making it legal. She opened one of the boxes and pulled out a small stack of brochures she had printed, Women Who Return: A Healing Farm Experience. Do you know how many women need this? She snapped. I know how many women don't own the property they're trying to monetize. She flinched like I'd slapped her. She didn't cry. Not in front of me. She just stared for a long moment, then walked to her car without touching the other boxes. I watched her drive off, slowly, head high. I didn't feel relief. Not yet. But I felt still. That night I swept the barn floor, took down the sheer curtains, folded the chairs. I found a stack of affirmation cards she had taped to the stall walls. Most were curled at the edges. I kept one. You are the steward of your own peace. I taped it to the inside of the barn door, so I would see it every morning. I gave it a few days. Carla didn't come back for the rest of her things. She didn't call. She didn't text. But she did post. 3 days after I asked her to leave, a video went up on her Instagram set to soft piano music, sunlight streaming through a curtain, her eyes just barely tearful. Sometimes, she said, the places we thought were ours turn out to be lessons, not legacies. And that's okay, because we carry home within us. It got 4,000 likes in 2 hours. The caption read, I'll be creating something even more powerful elsewhere. Thank you to those who held space while I let go of something I once believed was mine. I released Happy Healing. Roots are no townership. I didn't comment. I didn't watch the rest. But I did take note of something she wasn't letting go. She was reframing. So I reframed too. The next morning, I contacted a local courier. Not a moving company, just someone with a clean van, good reviews, and enough discretion not to ask questions. I packed the remaining 10 boxes myself, each one carefully labeled, taped, and organized. I made an inventory list with a black pen, clipped it to the T. I stacked them on the porch just beside the rocking chair where Dad used to sit every evening. Here's what the labels said. Box 1, tea rituals and empty cups. Box 2, branding photo shoots, unlicensed, use of barn. Box 3, guest linens, for guests who didn't ask. Box 4, sage bundles, unburned. Box 5, printed brochures, self-initiated legacy edition. Box 6, affirmation cards, Curled, Not Cured Box 7, Crystal Collection. Emotionally Charged. Box 8, Sound Bowl, Minor Scratch Stillworks. Box 9, Mismatched Intentions. Box 10, Entitlement Fragile. In the final box, I included a folder. Inside was a copy of the notarized will printed on heavy paper highlighted in yellow. Along with it, a brief note in my handwriting. You made an announcement. I made the arrangements. No signature. She'd know who it was from. The courier confirmed delivery the next day around noon. She answered the door herself. I didn't ask how they knew it was a small town. Word traveled. By sunset, her Instagram had gone quiet. But the ripples started elsewhere. First came the email from one of the women who'd visited the farm weeks earlier. Subject concerned. Body. Hi, Margaret. I attended one of Carla's retreat circles a few weekends ago, and, well, I thought you should know she was promoting herself as the owner. I feel misled. I paid for a healing experience, and now I'm not sure where my money went. I responded with a PDF copy of the property record and wished her well. Then came a DM from a journalist who had been following Carla's coaching career. Off the record, she wrote, "There's some chatter about a potential expose on influencer overreach. Would you be willing to comment?" I declined. I wasn't interested in spectacle. But I did notice that within 48 hours, Carla's website was offline. The River Sanctuary Facebook page disappeared. Her podcast took an unexplained hiatus. And her boyfriend. He moved out. Quietly. His name disappeared from her tagged photos. One day he was posting building empires together. The next, nothing. I didn't celebrate. Not out loud. But I did go into town that weekend, bought a small cake from the local bakery, and shared it with Ruth, the woman who'd watched us grow up from across the property line. She said I heard about the boxes. I nodded. She raised an eyebrow. Did you pack anything for regret? I shook my head. Didn't have room. She laughed. We ate in silence. The next morning, I started planting sunflowers along the fence line. They'd take a while to bloom, but they'd come up straight, no hashtags needed. For a while, things were just quiet. Carla didn't call. She didn't come back to the farm. And for the first time in months, there were no deliveries with her name on them, no packages of herbal teas left at the gate, no guest cars parked in the driveway. But silence doesn't always mean surrender. It just means recalibration. Her followers didn't vanish. They shifted. She changed her bio from founder of River Sanctuary to healing architect. Location fluid. Subtle but telling. She started posting about nomadic peace and letting go of fixed narratives, but the tone was different. Shrill at the edges. Trying too hard to sound unaffected. I got a call from Mom a week later. She's been very emotional, she said, softly. Says she feels erased. She tried to erase me first, I said. There was a pause, a long one. She just wanted to feel close to him, Mom added. That farm, it was part of both your childhoods. Only one of us came back to take care of it. I know, she said. I know that. We didn't argue. There was nothing left to argue. The next ripple hit harder. One of Carla's sponsors, some women's supplement brand, cut ties with her. Quietly. No drama, no statement. Just gone from her profile. Another brand followed, then another. I never said a word publicly. But truth doesn't need a megaphone. It just needs consistency. A former client of hers posted a thread on Twitter. Screenshots, email receipts, promises Carla had made about retreats that never happened. Women who had paid deposits arranged travel never got clarity. One of them tagged me. Is this the same Rivers farm she claimed to co-own? I replied with a link to the county deed. That thread went viral. By the end of the month, Carla had gone private. Her ex-boyfriend now moved back to Austin. He unfollowed her on everything. She made a post about parting paths and honoring diverging journeys, but I knew what had happened. He didn't sign up for Scandal or Truth. She stopped posting entirely by mid-month. No videos, no voice notes, no sunrise meditations. Just a blank profile photo and a locked feed. But the real moment of finality came in the form of a letter. Handwritten, no return address, just a white envelope in my mailbox. Inside, you didn't have to humiliate me. You could have just let me pretend. No signature, no apology, just that one sentence. I sat with it for a long time. Then I folded the letter and placed it in the same drawer where Dad's will had once lived. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Outside, the barn was still. The fields were quiet. The wind moved through the trees without resistance. She had tried to plant a legacy built on fiction. It didn't take root. The hardest part wasn't asking her to leave. It was deciding what stayed. Once Carla was gone, the farm felt bigger. Not just in space, but in sound. The quiet was thicker, more layered. The kind of quiet that forces you to hear things again, your own footsteps, the clatter of dishes in the sink, the rustle of leaves against the barn roof. I took down every trace she left behind. The affirmation cards, the guest slippers, the chakra chart she had pinned to the pantry door. Not with bitterness, just intention. Then I got to work. I converted the old tool shed into a workroom. Added shelves, a soft chair, a small desk. I painted the walls a soft, chalky blue, nothing trendy, just calm. I called it the corner, even though it wasn't attached to the house. That's where I started mapping something new. I wasn't going to build a business, or a brand, or a sanctuary. I was going to build usefulness. On Saturdays, I opened the barn for a small group of local women, mostly in their 30s and 40s. Women who were done with pretending they had it together. A couple of them were single moms. One was recently divorced, one just liked goats. We called it Garden Saturdays. No hashtags, no waivers. We planted herbs in the front beds, built raised boxes for tomatoes, learned how to seal a chicken coop before rain. Someone brought muffins. Someone else brought seeds they had saved from their grandmother's garden. One day we sat in a circle and just drank coffee while the wind blew through the barn. It wasn't curated. It wasn't filmed. It wasn't content. It was mine. And it was enough. I didn't post about it. I didn't even tell Mom. It wasn't secrecy. It was sovereignty. There's a kind of restoration that doesn't need to be shared in order to be real. A kind that doesn't come with before and after pictures. Just the quiet knowledge that something broken has been tended to. I watched the sunflowers start to sprout along the fence line. One by one, their leaves unfurled like they trusted me again. Some afternoons, I'd sit on the back steps with a book and I'd think about Dad. How he never asked for applause. How he just did what needed doing. How his legacy wasn't in speeches but in structure. Carla had tried to make the farm a platform. I made it a place again. Place. It was Mr. Hank, our neighbor from across the ridge, who gave me the only comment that ever felt like closure. He'd come by to drop off a bag of sweet corn. I handed him back his casserole dish from a few weeks earlier, still wrapped in a clean towel. We stood in the shade of the porch for a while, not saying much. He looked out at the pasture where the sunflowers had started to lean toward the sky like they knew where they belonged. So he said finally, "She's really gone." I nodded. He scratched at his chin, squinting. "You didn't burn the bridge," he said. "You just took back the tools they stole to build it." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Because it was true. That was the thing no one really talks about. How some people don't steal with force. They steal with softness, with performance, with language. They steal through suggestion, through charm, through stories that sound better than the truth. And when you refuse to play along, they call it cruelty. But this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about drama. It was about the line between generosity and erasure. I had been generous for a long time, with space, with time, with silence. But I wasn't going to be erased. Dad didn't leave me a speech. He left me the land. Not because I was louder. Not because I asked, but because I stayed. Because I showed up. Because I kept things alive. And now, for the first time in years, the farm felt like it belonged to someone who listened. Sometimes I still find little reminders of Carla's version of the story. A crystal behind a tree stump. A forgotten journal tucked under a bench. A laminated quote curled at the edge, still taped to the wall inside the barn. "You are the steward of your own peace." She didn't live it, but she wasn't wrong. I've kept that one. And some evenings when the sun tilts just right and the wind carries the kind of quiet that feels earned, I'll sit on the porch and listen. Not for voices, not for applause, just for the rustle of leaves, the creak of the gate, the sound of something once fractured finally holding steady. Not every legacy is loud. Some just grow back, one fence post at a time.